It's lovely to see you all here at Les's home. I just want to mention, first of all, can you turn off your phone? Also, I can see a few new ladies. And whoever would like to join our mailing list, we meet every month. Can you let Lorna know? She has the list of people, and she would let you know when and where we meet. I'll ask Shirley now to introduce us. Can you please be quiet a minute? Whoever hasn't got a diary, Emunah diary, I've still got a few left.
I'd like to have one.
Please, with pleasure. And can you give this?
Are there any seats on the back
One
wall
more.
or over there? Because it's
Yes.
just all ladies.
Is it possible?
Oh, you want?
So sit down.
Yeah, Ronald, can you sit down? Because Shirley wants to introduce this.
This was the going to be reveal so many new things to me. One thing I just wanted to mention that you probably know but didn't mention to them is that the Amshin of a Rebbe who was in Japan was once called by the Japanese. He once went to the Japanese because it turned out that they had been told by the Germans to start creating camps and placing the Jews in camps and also to try and exterminate them.
Let's be around.
So the Amshin of a Rebbe said he's going to represent the Jews. He came to the Japanese leader, whoever it was, a general, and he said to them, you know, the reason why the Germans are doing this to us is because we're different from them, but you're also different. And when they finish with us, they're going to start with you. He basically persuaded him that way. And this was one of the factors that influenced the Japanese. They realized that the German racial theory wasn't going to help them very much in the long run.
So you know how they knew that?
Yeah.
He said, how do you know? So he said he had read that in the newspaper that a German wanted to marry a Japanese and they couldn't get a marriage certificate.
Really? Wow.
And then they checked it out and saw it was true.
Wow. Okay, so anyway, to bring you back to the present, which is a little bit difficult. I once spoke to you a year or two ago, but I would like to speak about a totally different topic. I was born in Sagittarius, and that means that I've got a free spirit that wants to always get out of a schedule and go on vacation. I never find the opportunity to do so very much because I'm busy, and B, because I've got a large family. It's rather difficult to get them to go on vacation. But I have a friend who has a vacation retreat in the Galilee, a very, very pretty place. And his place is basically available during the winter months. So what I wanted to suggest, and I made a kind of a brochure which I can give to you after, is to try and get the group together to go to this vacation retreat, to make kind of a real 3-day escape from the 6-month drudgery that we have at present from Pesach, from Sukkot until Pesach. We have a very long year, and I put together a kind of an itinerary with all kinds of activities that might interest you. So all I wanted to do is to offer you this thing. You can look through and see it and see if it interests you. That's all.
You wrote the dates the 19th to the 21st.
Right.
Is the alternative as well possibly the 26th to the 28th?
Yes,
And there's coffee and tea. Okay, and there's coffee and tea?
I wrote my number down.
Sure.
And speakers today, Dr. Glassman, has made himself an expert on this
I don't know
fascinating
about that.
subject of Sugihara. Dr. Glassman was born in South Africa, and like many families from South Africa, their origins are from Lithuania. Right. And he knew the names of the hometown of his family, and at one point, 2.5 years ago, he took a heritage tour to Lithuania, which must have been very, very fascinating. And somehow he became extremely taken with the story of Sugihara, and he's going to explain to us exactly how and what he became involved. But the most interesting thing that he also mentioned to me was that Japanese tourists are now coming to Lithuania because they have heard of Sugihara and they're proud of him. He's now considered a hero in Japan. And to hear the whole story of the turnaround is very fascinating. So I call upon Dr. Glassman now to address us. Thank you.
Is there a seat over there? Oh, that's right.
Okay.
Am I in the way?
No, it's okay. Okay.
Shirley, could you move back just a little bit?
First of all, I really would like to thank you all for giving us the invitation and the chance to speak to such an amazing group, Emunah. Emunah, what it stands for and what you do, and I'm in awe because Emunah, faith, is what it's all about. And it's coming up for Hanukkah, and the whole story you're going to see is a miracle had a lot to do with Hanukkah. And I think what you all do, the chesed that your organization promotes, and not only promotes, that you're all actively involved in, it's such a zchut, it's such an honor to be giving you a little bit of a talk. I wouldn't know about an expert, but what happened is that 2.5 years ago, my wife and I, we went on a heritage tour of Lithuania, and I videoed it. It was Latvia, Lithuania, and Belarus. And when we went to Kovno, I'd always heard of Sugihara. I always knew that he was a Chasidei Umat Olam, one of the righteous Gentiles. So we go into the consulate, and we're all walking around and looking at the pictures, and it's very, very interesting and very moving. And then we see a whole load of Japanese tourists arriving, and they come in single file. They're so amazingly disciplined. They walk, they sit, they're so quiet. Us are all over the show, we're walking, we're talking. Here they sit and they start crying. And they give a talk and they're showing a movie which we're going to show you tonight. And they really were crying. I actually videoed them a little bit.
They were crying?
They were crying, they're very emotional. Sugihara, what happened is that in his lifetime he was persona non grata. He actually, he did something, knowing him and his wife, they made the decision that they're going to do the visas. They didn't do it, they knew that if he does the visas, if they do the visas, he's going to lose his kavod, his honor, his parnosa, and his whole future as a diplomat. And he was a very, very well-liked and well-known diplomat, and he had a whole future ahead of him. So him and his wife made the decision. They knew, they mirosh from the beginning. He didn't go into it lightly. He knew that if he does it, he's got a lot to lose. And then what I'd like you to all think about, we're going to watch the events that happened and the movie that I actually managed to get when I was in the consulate that was shown on Japanese television. But in the back of your minds, why did he do it? The reason, why would somebody do something like that? Why would they be prepared to help a nation that they have no connection with and give up everything? Now, this was the book that Mr. Sugihara wrote, Yokika Sugihara wrote after he was Nifta. He was made Chasidei Umat Olam, righteous amongst the Gentiles, in 1985. And he was already too old to go to Tokyo. They had it at the embassy in Tokyo. He was unknown. Till that time, nobody had heard of him. He was really a persona non grata. But they made him Chasidei Umat Olam, and it was publicized in the papers. And a year later, he was Nifta. And then his wife decided to write this book. She wrote this book called, and the movie's based on this book. Now, what happens is, if you get the book, and I managed to get it on eBay, Walter Mondale, who was the Vice President of America, you know, we've got the elections happening today, so he writes that Sugihara is unique in world history, because he really gained nothing, he just lost. He gained in Olam Haba, there's no question, but he is a unique individual. And he writes in the back of her book. So for me, I've had the great zchut, really such an honor. I was in the Mir Yeshiva, because a lot to do with this story has got a lot to do with the Mir. And not only the Mir, it's the Amshanova, Rebbe, it's so many of the great Rabbonim, Rav Volkin. Now, we're all in Bayit Vegan, and a lot of these people, the Amshanov Rebbe is here in Bayit Vegan, Rav Volkin's in Bayit Vegan. A lot is also to do people that we know, that we see in our own area. So I was in the Mir just before Rosh Hashanah, and I don't know if you know Alex Gerber, Rabbi Alex Gerber, he took me to the Mir, and he introduced me to Rebbetzin Nossenfinkel. And she wanted to know. Alex told her that we have an idea why Sugihara did what he did, and she wanted to know. And there I was in the study of Reb Nossenfinkel explaining to the Rebbetzin why he did it. We have a very good idea why he did it. And she was really amazed. She really didn't know the story before. And it was such a zchut to tell her. And then he also introduced me to Reb Yitzhak Ezrachi. He's one of the Rosh Hashivas there. His brother Uri Ezrachi is here in Bayit as well. So his wife is Reb Chaim Shmulevitz's daughter, who was in Shanghai and in Japan. And I told him the story in Hebrew. My Hebrew's not that brilliant, but he was amazing, and he gave me all the time, and I told him the story. And it was just such a zchut for me to tell one of the Rosh Hashivas of the Mir the story of Sugihara. So I've really been blessed, and I hope after today you'll have a bit more of an insight. It really is quite an amazing thing. Why would somebody who is totally detached from Judaism be prepared to give up really everything in order to save Yidden? So the movie that I'm going to show you is actually based on this book. This was written in 95 after his death. Then what happened is that somebody saw this book and they said, we really need to make a movie. And they made this movie, and it was shown on Japanese television, and he instantly became a hero. It's the same, very similar to Schindler. Before they made the book and the movie of Schindler, very few people knew about Schindler's List. Once they had the movie, the same would apply to Anne Frank. There wouldn't have been the diary. They wouldn't have published the diary. She would have been unknown. So with Sugihara, he was not known. He had a very difficult life. In fact, when people from the Israeli embassy and survivors really wanted to meet him, to thank him for saving them and their families, and they eventually did track him down, and they found him, and they wanted to pay him. He said, I don't do it for money. I don't want any money. He was so poor. He had to go work in Russia. He knew Russian fluently, and that's one of the reasons why he was sent to Lithuania. But they did find him, and he didn't want to take a cent. And they found that his son, he couldn't even support his own son. So the Israeli government actually paid for a bursary at Hebrew University, and his youngest son learned at Hebrew University. But he was unknown. When she wrote this book, and when they made the movie, the next day he became an instant sensation. Today, Sugihara, it's amazing, he's now regarded as one of the top 10 heroes of Japan. If you see any Japanese tourist, and I've done it a lot, and I've asked when we were in Indonesia at a stamp exhibition, and I met the Japanese, they had like a booth for Japanese stamps, and I asked them if they've heard of Sugihara. They've all heard of Sugihara. He's very, very well known in Japan. They made stamps of him, they're monuments of him, rightfully so. But until this movie was shown in Japan, he was really not known. So I'm going to show part of this movie, and then I'm going to show something else, and then we're going to, hopefully I'm going to explain to you a very good reason why he did it. And his wife actually explains. Okay. Sorry, just going to switch this on. So the question still remains, he did it, and he actually decided to write the visas, knowing that he was going to lose everything. So when I showed the movie that I made when we were in Lithuania, one of the scholar in residence, who I'm very close with, Hugh Reichland, he gave over the most amazing story. He said what happened is in 1939, when the war broke out, what happened was a lot of Polish Juden, as you saw in the movie, crossed the border to Lithuania. Lithuania still remained independent, and Lithuania allowed Jews to come in. So a lot of Jews came to Vilna and Kovno. The Mir left the Mir and was in Vilna. What happened is that in Kovno, around Hanukkah time, there was a little boy. Those who know me, you all know that name quite well. Have any of you heard the name, except our neighbors, Soliganor? Have you heard the name Soliganor? Okay. So Sonny was 11 years old. Okay. He was 11 years old, a little Jewish boy living in Kovno.
What name?
Soliganor. His parents gave him Hanukkah geld. The next day, he was alone. His sister and his brother were out. His parents were out. 2 women knocked on the door. This is just before Hanukkah. And they said, is there any money lying around in the home to help for the Polish Yidden? So all the Hanukkah geld that he had, he gave these 2 ladies. Then he's walking along the main road, it's like a boulevard in Kovno, and he sees a persometer advert for Laurel and Hardy. Do you all know Laurel and Hardy?
Yeah.
When you tell the story to youngsters or yeshiva bookers, they have no idea who Laurel and Hardy is. Anyway, so he wanted to see it, but he had no money. So he went to his aunt. Her name was Anushka. She had a confectionery shop. And inside the shop, he sees an Oriental person. And what's very interesting in Lithuania, even to this very day, you don't see a lot of foreigners. It's mainly just Lithuanians, and there were Jews and Lithuanians. There weren't many foreigners. It's the first time he had ever seen an Oriental person in his life. He stares at him. Anyway, he tells his aunt that he gave a bit of tzedakah. Can she give him some money to see the movie? And he was very close with the aunt, and she said, with pleasure. And then she tells Sugihara, her client, who was only sent there 2 months before, and the only reason why he was sent, because he knew Russian, and he was there ready to find out what the Russians and the Germans were doing. Anyway, she tells Sugihara, her client, that this is my nephew, that he gave a bit of charity, and I'm going to give him money to see a film. So Sugihara went up to Soli, and he took out of his pocket money to give him. And Soli said, I can't take from you. They spoke in Russian. He said, I can't take from you. You're not my family. So Sugihara said to Soli, I'll be your uncle. So Soli said to Sugihara, if you're my uncle, you have to come to us for Hanukkah. And that changed Jewish history. It actually changed Jewish history. The fact that he invited him, he actually went. Motzei Shabbos, he went with his wife and his son, and his wife's sister, his sister-in-law, and the aunt. They all went to Soli's parents for Hanukkah. And Soli's parents were like, they couldn't believe that he actually had arrived, but they're there and they're lighting the candles and they're having dinner and they're having a meal. Soli's parents were helping a Polish father and a daughter, Greenblatt. They had escaped Poland. And he was in shock. He couldn't believe that there was a diplomat in a Jewish home, Hanukkah time 1939. His wife was killed while they were trying to escape Poland. He just couldn't believe that there was a diplomat in a Jewish home. It was like unheard of. Anyway, he told Sugihara how bad it was for the Yidden in Poland. And Sugihara really was listening to every word he said. He didn't know how bad it was for, he's hearing firsthand about the situation of the Yidden in Poland. Soli collected stamps, so I'm very close to Soli as well, and he used to invite him to the consulate. When you saw in the movie, the consulate's in the suburbs of Kovno. It's not in the city center. It was very near Soli's home. So he used to often go there and he used to give him Japanese stamps. Anyway, this Polish Yid, Greenblatt, told other Polish Yidden that there's a diplomat, a Japanese diplomat that has a close connection with the Yidden, that has a very strong affinity to Jews, and he was at a Hanukkah party. And then quite a few weeks later, you see them all coming to the consulate. Now, in the movie, they mention the name, but they didn't mention one of the person who was actually the father that came in to ask for the visas was Zorch Verhaftig. His son teaches here in, actually his son said it's Zorach, you have to pronounce it Zorach, but his son Yaakov teaches in Bayit Ariel, Dayanos, and I met the eldest son Emmanuel. And they go in and they ask him, can you give us the visas? And he says, he telex Japan 3 times, and Japan said, no, I can't. And then him and his wife agonized that night, what are we going to do? If we don't do the visas, like you saw in the movie, they're going to die. So then eventually he decides that they're going to do it. So how do we know the story is true? Because it's amazing that a little boy that did a little tzedakah, that did Hachnasat Orchim, changed Jewish history. I'm just going to show you. Okay, so this is a picture of Soli, and this is in her book. Can you read there? If I read it, this is Mrs. Sugihara. Mrs. Sugihara writes this in her own book. She says there that Shreina Sugihara's decision to issue visas may have been influenced. She puts there as a 14-year-old, but this is what she remembers, but he was 11, Jewish boy named Soli Ganor. He invited Miss Sugihara to celebrate. It was, she put here the first night, but it was actually Motzei Shabbos. Hanukkah. This may have been Sugihara's very first contact with the Jew in Kovno. And this is coming from Mr. Sugihara, the person who wrote the book. So when I heard the story, I was blown away. The person who told me, Hugh Rockland, said that he actually met him. Solly today is now 91. I met him when he's 90. He lives in Ramat HaSharon. I've never met anybody like this in my life. His mind is very focused. He's very, very tzenor. When I went to see him, I interviewed him. I spent 2.5 hours with him. Then I said to him, Solly, have you got any regrets? And he said, of course. He would have made sure that his father would have taken the visa, but they had a business and they couldn't sell it. So we stayed behind. He went through the ghetto. He was in Kovno, then he was in Dachau. He was with Viktor Frankl in Dachau. And then he was in the Death March. And he was saved by American-Japanese soldiers. How many of us know that there were American-Japanese soldiers that actually liberated Dachau? Anyway, he said the worst thing is that my mother and my brother were murdered. And he said, if only my father would have taken the visas. Anyway, he's 91 and he still is very active on Facebook. And on Facebook, he wrote once, Vehisha Amda, and he said, if only we had our own country 10 years before, my mother and my brother wouldn't have been murdered. When I read that, sure, it was very emotional. I get Mishpacha every week, and they featured Yonatan Razal. They have all the singers like Shveki and Mordechai Ben David. When it came to Yonatan Razal, they asked, what's your favorite song, who was your big influence, and what is your passion? When it came to Yonatan Razal, his passion is the Mir. He studied in the Mir, and his passion is the Mir. So Motzei Shabbos, I phoned him, and I asked Yonatan, do you know how the Mir was saved? So most people who are at the Mir actually know about Shanghai. I'd say 99.9% know about that it went to Shanghai. Some know about Japan. Not too many know about Sugihara, but everyone knows about Shanghai. Anyway, I told him the story about Solly. And I said, Yonatan, can I ask you the biggest favor? Solly, unfortunately, he's not so mobile as he used to be. He doesn't like leaving his home because he fell once, so he stays more at his home. Could I come over to you and can we record you playing Vehisha Amda? And we dedicate it to Solly. So he said to me, absolutely not. He can't do that. He said he has to meet him. So I'm going to play you something what happened. It was actually a year ago, just before Hanukkah, that I just hope it comes out quite nicely. So I took Yonatan. There's Solly at the age of 90. And this is Yonatan's son. Now, for those who don't know, Yonatan composed Vehisha Amda. This is his composition and was voted the #1 composition in Israel a few years ago.
What's his name?
Yonatan
Yonatan
Razal. This is being played a lot on Galgalat, because I want you to hear Katomti. It's extremely, this is played on Galgalat. It's played, most Israelis will know this song. It was extremely emotional, having a private, but it was very, very amazing. On YouTube. I'll put it on YouTube and you can all see it.
Yes.
Oh, okay, I just want to show you here. So what happened is,
He composed it.
Okay, Jonathan composed it. Now, this is, you're going to hear, so this is Soli on the left with the German president.
And in what year was this, Soli?
Okay, I just want to show you. This is, for me, one of the most amazing pictures that I saw in Soli's home.
You and
That's with Mrs. Sugihara. That was Mrs. Sugihara.
you had a very close connection with the family.
This is Soli Ganoa.
I traveled with her. She was invited to all kind of places and she took me with her. They really looked like a couple.
It's amazing. And you spoke at Barnes and Noble and had so many different...
Okay, there's quite a bit, but I can't do everything. I just want to show you those gets a tour guide at Yad Vashem. So this picture is at Yad Vashem by Kedushin. He did the picture. And this is Soli as a little boy.
This is in
Kovno.
Kovno Ghetto.
Corner of Vars.
And how old were you at the time?
I was probably around 14.
And do you remember? You remember it?
I remember it, of course. Photograph recognition.
And this is the book. This is read in German schools. It was very there.
And this book is
In German.
in German.
That's how they live. One of the largest publishers in the world, Fisher Family. Now in the 6th edition.
And he has somebody who's 91. It's unbelievable. But when I saw him, this is when he was it's a year ago, so he was 90. I just want to show you here. I have a very, it's a squid, I have a very close connection with Soli. He told me the Japanese ambassador wants to come and see him. So I thought, it's something I really have to be at. So I phoned the embassy, the Japanese embassy, and I said, please, I'd love to be there. So I sent my CV and they allowed me. This is the Japanese ambassador with Soli.
Thank you very much for sharing all these things. And I realized that perhaps, Japanese government hasn't really thanked you for sharing your experience with the Japanese, promoting mutual understanding between two people. So I wrote my thank you letter. This is my letter on behalf of
This is a picture of him holding the...
contributions. Can I just read? Okay. Dear Mr. Soligano, on behalf of the Japanese government, I would like to express my sincere appreciation for your significant contribution in deepening mutual understanding between Japanese and Jewish peoples, and thus promoting bilateral relations with Japan and Israel. Your story, while bringing home the horror of the Holocaust, has touched many people with the courage and compassion shown in the extreme situation. Your account about your encounter with the Japanese diplomat
You can pass this around. This is the actual,
reminds us
what the Japanese government gave Soli.
that exists between our two peoples. I believe that your efforts to share your story with so many Japanese people have strengthened the foundation for a greater friendship between Japan and Israel. Best wishes for your health and long life. Sincerely yours, Koji Tomika, Glassman, Japan.
for me, one of the highlights was, I'm just going to show you, in the middle here is Reb Chaim Balkin. I don't know if you know, Reb Chaim Balkin was actually born in Shanghai in 1945. His father was one of the main Rabbonim. They got a visa actually from Sugihara, his parents. His father was, Reb Chaim's father was very close to the Chofetz Chaim. And there's a famous picture in Reb Chaim's home, which is here in Rav Kasuta, here in Bayit again. We see the Chofetz Chaim, and on his left side is Reb Chaim's father. And his grandfather was the Pinsker Rov, the Beis Aaron, from a very, very illustrious and very, very kosher family. Anyway, he was in Shanghai, and he looked after a lot of the Bochrim. And Reb Chaim was born in 1945 in Shanghai. His sister, she still remembers, the older sister, Chayaleh, she still remembers going on the train. She still remembers being in Japan and Shanghai. And she just came out with this book. It's the most amazing book called In the Crook of the Rock, Jewish Refugee in a World Gone Mad, the Chayaleh Balkin story. It's a phenomenal book. So what happened is Reb Chaim always knew, he grew up always knowing that there was a Jewish boy that invited Sugihara to his home for Hanukkah. He knew that. He didn't know that he was alive, but he knew that there was a Jewish boy that he invited. Because the question, why did he do it? They just used to discuss it. Anyway, when I went to see him, because he knows that I'm kind of passionate about the story, I spent 2 hours with him in his home, and it was wonderful. He went with his sister back with the family to Shanghai, and he was on the front page of the newspapers in Shanghai. Anyway, what happened is that when I told him that Sonny's still alive, he became very emotional. And I said, you know, Rob, let's go visit him. So the following week, as soon as we could, we actually went to see Sonny. And this is when he met Sonny. I videoed it, but it was too emotional. They hugged each other and he was crying. And he said to, and I've got it on video, he said to Sonny, it's because of you I'm alive. It was very special. Because of you my family survived. Now Sonny had an influence. There were many people that were involved in the story, there's no question. But he had a tremendous influence by him coming to the home for the Hanukkah party, just spending the night with the Hanukkah and hearing about how bad it was for the Yidden in Poland. That definitely had a very big role to play in Sugihara's decision to do what he did. But for me to be there when to see somebody telling Sonny that it's because of you I'm alive, it was exceptionally emotional. What was very special here as well, they spent 2 hours. This is the Rebbitzin. I'm sure you've seen her in Bayit again. They live in Rehov Kasuto. He's the Mashgiach of Ateris.
What's her name?
Balkin.
Yeah, I know them, yeah.
So it was incredible. They spent 2 hours. They were sitting here. There's a word, so gewaltig. I can't tell you how amazing it was to see how they were singing together and just speaking and reminiscing. It was very, very special. Wow. So that for me, it's been such an honor and a privilege to have been part of it. So I just want to show you. Now, I took I just want to show you this. What happened is the Japanese ambassador, I just thanked him for giving me the opportunity to be there. And I'm going to give you each a copy of this when we go. So the Japanese ambassador, I just sent him a little email just thanking him for allowing me to be there and for what he did for Sally. So he writes there, thank you for your thoughtful message. I too very much enjoyed my meeting with Mr. Ganol, which will remain one of the fondest memories of my time in Israel. And I thought to myself, here is the Japanese ambassador who met somebody who's 90 years old, he just turned 91 recently, at the age of 90 years old, and that remains one of his fondest memories in Israel. It's amazing. It's really something very special.
May I ask you, how are you related to this story?
So our family came from Mariupol. Mariupol is south of Kovno, and
you are how related?
no. So our family came from, most South Africans came from Lithuania. So my wife's family is from Latvia, but our family is from Mariupol, which is south of Kovno. And I was at the embassy, and when I saw the Japanese, and maybe I can show you just a quick video of the Japanese, you'll see it was amazing to think that today in Japan, he's so well known with the Japanese, but unfortunately, Here in Israel, for saying, there is a place in Netanya, if ever you go to South Netanya, where they've got a planetarium, they actually made a street called Sugihara, and the sun came, and then they went to the mirror, and the late Amshana Barabi's mother was at the mirror, together with there was Rebbetzin Izrahi, and a patient of mine, Tamat Sedek, who's a Japanese convert, from Japanese convert, and they met the son at the mirror. Here, I'm just going to show you a picture of one of the grandsons of Sugihara came to visit Soli. And a lot of people, a lot of Japanese, they're teachers, they come all the way, like they go to, it's a bit further, going to Kovno, to Lithuania, but they do make like a pilgrimage and they come visit Soli. And if you saw on that video where I showed you with the Japanese ambassador, we actually gave him this book. This is a book called Passage to Freedom, the Sugihara story. And it starts off, and this is done in Japanese and they just translated it into English, but the very first page of the book starts off, there's a saying, actually I'll put it up, you can pass it around.
You read it.
Okay, so I'll just put it up for you.
Yeah.
There's a saying that the eyes tells everything about a person. At a store, my father saw a young Jewish boy who didn't have enough money to buy what he wanted. So my father gave the boy some of his. That boy looked at my father's eyes and to thank him invited my father to his home. That is when my family and I went to the Hanukkah celebration for the first time. I was 5 years old. This is written by his son, Hiroka Sugihara. So this book is in Japan. So a lot of Japanese educators, they read this book, so they know the story about a little boy being invited for Hanukkah. Okay, I know the time's getting late. I just want to end off with something actually quite incredible as well. Do any of you get mishpacha or ami? Okay, so in the movie, you saw Curacao. Did you see that they got entry visas to Curacao? Okay, it's Curacao by Suriname. Sugihara could not have done the visas if they didn't have the entry visas to Curacao. So I tell the story of Sugihara to whoever I can because I love telling the story. So my niece, Baruch Hashem, just got engaged. She came with her chosen. They were at us for Rosh Hashanah and I told him the story. And he was invited to somebody called Nathan Luen. Do any of you know the name Nathan Luen?
Yeah.
So Nathan Luen was actually on the front page of Mishpacha. This was after Sukkot. And Ami, I think it's the first time that somebody's been on the front page of both. So him and his daughter, if you Google Luen and Luen, are possibly the two most tsanua, modest, but the most famous Jewish lawyers. They represent a lot of the cases in the Supreme Court in America. And they had him in Mishpacha and Ami with the whole Kavanaugh asking him his advice, what's happening with the Supreme Court. But more important, when I went to visit him, I'd heard that he was in Japan, a boy of 4. I didn't realize, and he told me the story, that it was actually his mother was the one who got the very first Curacao entry visa. So I couldn't believe what I was hearing when I was in his home. Here, it was like Bamikre, but not only by chance, it was all meant to be, but I was just invited to his home, and there he started telling me the story about his mother, who was Dutch, and his father was a Dr. Luen, who was Polish, and she decided that they had to leave Poland, and they went to Lithuania, and she, as a Dutch citizen, she was the one that asked the ambassador in Latvia, the Decker, if you can give us the Curacao visas. They actually wanted to go to Java and Sumatra, and he said, you can't go there, but you can go to Curacao. She got the very first handwritten Curacao visa. So I'm just going to show you for 2 minutes. I went with Lucy with my wife. Motzei Shabbos, we went to the home, and it was amazing. We were in the home, and hold on. Right, here we go. So this is Nathan Lewin with his daughter.
It gives me a great honor and a privilege to introduce Nathan and Elisa Lewin.
We're not going to watch the whole thing, but it's on YouTube. But this is, and I had no idea when I saw him that he was such a hush of a lawyer. He's a very timid, very, very modest person.
My parents were Dr. Isaac Lewin, who was well known in the United States, but before the war also well known in Poland, because he was the son of the Rabbi of Rzeszów, who was not only a great Talmudic and biblical scholar, but also elected twice to the Polish Sejm. My parents married as a result of an arranged marriage, a shidduch, which was originally suggested by the rabbi who was the originator of the idea of Daf Yomi, who was a good friend of my grandfather. Rav Meir Shapiro, founder of Yeshiva Chachmei Lublin, was it?
So I'm just forwarding a little bit. You can watch this on YouTube.
Take a
other descriptions of how these Curacao visas came about.
Indeed.
And it's interesting, as we mentioned, Time Goodworth was my great uncle Leo or Lady Sternheim's.
So this you can all watch on YouTube. They've given me permission to put this on YouTube. You can see the whole interview.
They say my great-grandmother was number 16 on the list, my grandparents and my father were number 17 on the list, and my great-uncle Leo Sternheim was 18 on the list. Time Goodworth was number 1,264 on the list.
Okay, what she's saying here is quite amazing. The list that Sugihara did, her parents were number 16, 17 and 18, with the uncles and the brother. So they were one of the very first Sugihara to get the Sugihara visas.
He was number 455.
Under Lewin.
He received his visa to July 30th.
It's a Polish word, but I don't know. There was a honor that the Schroeder rule that if you left,
I'm just going to show you.
that's my earliest childhood.
His earliest childhood memory was when he was in Japan, he was wearing shoes, and they shouted at him for wearing shoes at the age of 4. It's the first thing he remembers when he was in Japan.
And I know we just
Well, we thank you for taking the time to really document this.
It's been a great honor and privilege. Thank you so very much.
Okay, so they gave me, these are the original, they kept the original visas. This is Nathan as a little boy, this is his parents. This was where he wrote by hand the entry visa into Curacao.
How many people get
With 7,000 were saved by the visas. And they say today in the world there's more than 50,000 Yidden because of it. And then this is the original Sugihara visa, and they number 16, here we go, Lewin, Sternheim and Lewin. He's number 17 on the Sugihara list. So that was such a scoop to be there. Anyway, I want to, I'm just going to switch this off.
Your parents were between them?
Okay, so I want to thank you all, and I hope we shed some light on this very, very fascinating story. But thank you very much. And I thank you all for coming. It's such a lovely attendance. Thank you.
Les, thank you very, very much.
Okay.
Excuse me, Joel, Dom just wanted to say a couple of words.